Welcome everyone back to the Sean Trey Show. I've got a really interesting guest with me today, and I would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. My name is Brett Harned. I'm a consultant. I work with creative teams to help them with operations, project management, overall teamwork, to be honest with you. Really
That's
focus
awesome.
in on communication, collaboration, and culture within teams.
That's interesting because when a lot of people, when you're younger in life, you hear team and you're thinking a baseball team, football team, but the reality is that most people in their careers work a lot with different teams and they don't always work well together. That's one of the things that I've noticed with teams is I've had many iterations of different teams, and there are times where, people butt heads and it's challenging to have the same vision, or you have a great leader or you have an awful leader. What are some of the most important things to make projects happen and to make teams work well?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so much, right? I
Right?
think, yeah, it's such a huge topic. Really, to me, at the core of really good teamwork is what I said before. It's solid communication practices. It's talking about the way that we communicate, maybe even having documented the way that we communicate. Some just general understanding of what's expected of everyone. Same thing goes with collaboration, and in collaboration, I would include everything from process, like how we get things done, why we get things done, the actual act of collaborating, just opening up and talking about how we deliver is important. And unfortunately, it's something that some teams don't do.
Yeah.
Earlier, you mentioned, like a good leader, bad leader. I think regardless of the leader, it's important to know that teams can always be better.
I love
Um,
that.
there are always underlying things that teams can and should talk about in order to be better and be more efficient, whether they're teams that have been together for 10 years or more, or they're just a new team that's assembled for a specific project. To me, it's really important to align on the way you are going to communicate with one another, communicate with stakeholders, communicate about the work. Because without that, everybody's kind of just going to be working aimlessly on their own goals.
I remember in university, I played volleyball and
Mm-hmm.
and I played other team sports as well. But I remember we had one season where we had a bunch of great talented individuals, and we had the worst coach in the world. It was just a horrible, nice guy, but he didn't know the
Sure.
sport, didn't know what he was doing. And there was this, and I love what you pointed out, because there was a certain point in the middle of the season where we were just all sitting there. Everyone was like, this is not going right. This is not where we want to be. And we sat down and said, hey, you know what? Granted, this is just college. It's not a huge deal, but we all enjoy what we're doing. We're having fun. And but we would like to win. We would like to perform better. We would like this to be better. And it was just a player only meeting, and it was really great communication. And we all kind of recognized that this guy was not going to get us there because he didn't have the information, and he became a really good cheerleader for us on the sideline. But it was this powerful communication without. There didn't have to be a coach. It was something that we were able to do on our own. So I love that statement that you can accomplish something even with a leader who's subpar.
Yeah. And so, I mean, one of the things I've been talking about is that's a perfect example of how the team makes the team culture. You all
Yeah.
decided in that moment, hey, this is important to us. That's a shared value, right? This is
Yeah.
important to us. This is something we need to get out in the open and talk about. So while the leader may have been kind of setting the tone for the culture, you all recognized wasn't working and
Yeah.
reestablished that, which I think is pretty cool. And I see that happen often in professional teams. Now, we're not talking about sporting teams, but I mostly
Yeah.
work with
Yeah.
creative teams that are, making brands and websites and things like that.
It's awesome. And one of the things too, that there's these different levels of teams. And I know you're working with creative teams and professional teams. And it's really interesting because one of the areas that project management has really taken hold is in with tech and in with, large companies trying to do different things. But what's also kind of funny is that where a lot of people interact, the team that you're on every day that you don't necessarily call a team, is like the things that cracks me up is like anytime I read stuff about project management, I sit there and I start thinking about how to function in the team that is my family and the extended family, and so it's like, there's all of these things like what you were just talking about. We had something that happened in my house the other day. My brother-in-law is getting married soon. And so culturally, they have to clean up the house, get everything set. And I'm kind of OCD. I'm also a neat freak. I have a list of everything, and that's just how my brain functions. And, I also just am really studied about health, and I don't like, I just like to keep things clean. So one of my family members decided that it was a great idea to paint the kitchen, which it was. It was a great idea to paint the kitchen. We also should have pulled everything out and gotten a clean space. Didn't happen. And the kitchen was sanded down with all of the stuff just sitting around. And then they put down two tarps, loosely put down tarps, and then sanded it and painted it. And I walked in after a long day at work, and there was just paint chips and dust everywhere. And I just was like, this is not going to stand. I got to clean. I spent 3 hours cleaning, but it was like, if there had been better communication, if there had been a understanding, things like that can be figured out beforehand. And it's like
1,000%. Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't have to go there, and that time that I spent cleaning could have been put into some other creative pursuit. And then, it spirals. But it all started off with, like you said, clear communication. It was just, when it's not there, it doesn't work.
Well, I love that you brought that story up, because my book, Project Management for Humans, every chapter starts with a story from my personal life, whether
Yep.
it's something with my kids or something from me growing up. There are so many things that we do in life that are project management related that we
Yeah.
don't realize it. So to me, like, project management really is a part of just what we all do as humans, also as professionals. Some of us end up doing it professionally,
Yeah.
and others don't. But, others who are not doing it professionally are still doing some level of project, time, resource management. Something is happening with anyone who's kind
100%.
of working, So I find that really interesting, because I tend to think that the traditional project management books and organizations and teachings try to overinflate project management to something so much bigger, maybe to create more importance around it. And I'm not saying that it's not important, and I think it is very important. And it's an important function in many organizations to make sure that work is getting done within a budget, within a timeline. We all know those things, but it's really important to what we do day to day. And it's important that
Yeah.
people understand the basic concepts of it, because it can help you be more efficient, be a better team player, be a better
Yep.
leader,
Yep. Well, you hit on something that I love there. And as I'm proud, like, so this is my, like, I've got all the stuff I got to do, but then every day I create a daily list, and it's like, this
Cool.
is what I can get done today. This is what I'm hammering out today. And I was really proud, because my daughter yesterday was like, she's like, Daddy, can you help me make a to-do list that I can get done? And it's like, so I was like, well, what are the things that you really want to get done today? And she checked off everything except for the last one. And she was like, wow, Dad, I got a lot done today. I normally don't get this much done. And I said, like, that's it. It's like, if you can start figuring these things out, and it's like, I don't like the word to-do list. It's just stuff that she wants to tackle. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Things that we want to really hammer in on. Well, let me ask you this, because this is something for everyday person that's listening, project management for everyday people, how do you figure out where to start when you've got so much to do? Where do you find a starting point?
So it's prioritization, right? It's what is the thing that needs to get done first. So I do the same thing. I have a to-do list. I sit down with my to-do list. Usually I take about 10, 15 minutes in the morning before I get started my day. And I sit down and I just start listing the things that I need to do. I'll probably reference the to-do list from yesterday, things that
Yep.
didn't get done, right? And then I'll just start thinking about like, what are my deadlines? What are things that actually need to get done on a specific timeline, right? What are my priorities in terms of the people that I need to talk to or the meetings that I have? And then what are the things that are kind of movable that can happen tomorrow, the next day? And then I'll just prioritize that way. So I'll start doing the things that logically I either need to get done first because they're in a line of other things that need to get done. You know, there are dependencies on that thing, or they're things that I just need to get done because they're top of mind and they need to get done first that day. So it's really just prioritization. It's sitting down and understanding what needs to get done in what order and why. And then
I love
I'll
that.
say like most days. So the best part about a to-do list, I do call it a to-do list, is checking things off of it, right? It's like
I
you
love
make this
that.
whole list of things. The first thing that you can get done, you feel so good when you get that thing done. But when you do that, you then look at the next thing you have to do and you think, is that actually what I need to do next? Did
Yeah.
anything else come in? You know, it's a kind of like a moving project, a little bit of a wayfinding tool for your day, or for my day, at least.
Uh, I love the wayfinding thing because it's like that is so spot on, and I think that um, you are spot on. It's like I imagine it this way: like if I was, a pirate of old, and I'm sailing across the seas, I certainly have a goal in mind. But what if I pass another ship that says, "Hey, there is a galleon with gold this way." I'm like, okay, we're gonna adapt and go this
Mm-hmm.
way now because
Right.
there's something else that is a higher priority that pops up. But it's like, it's still at the end of the day, if you were a pirate of old, you've got to make sure that you're sailing in a general direction you want to be going. Got to make
Yep.
sure that you have food and water on there and people have a general state of health and that the boat is maintained and that these little things are getting done. Because that's one of the things, too, that I try to remember when I work on my projects is that certainly, people ask me, oh, I'd like to have, one of the biggest podcasts in the world. Well, how am I going to get there? A series of small steps. It all
Mm-hmm.
comes down to just those things that you can check off every day, but we don't realize the distance we can cover when we do that.
Right.
No, let me ask you this. What's the easiest way that you use to keep track of getting things done and what needs to get done and how you do it? Who's doing it?
Mm. Yeah. So this is a big one.
Yeah.
Project management tools, as I'm sure you know,
Yeah.
abound. There are so many of them. They
There are,
do
is,
so many different things. They're meant
yeah.
for so many different types of projects. So I always like to say I'm tool agnostic. There's not one
You
tool that
tool
I'm going to
agnostic. All right,
come
why don't
onto
you
your
talk to me about that?
not going to come onto your podcast and say you've got to use this tool. And you know why? Because that tool might work really well for me or the team that I'm consulting with right now because
Yeah.
of the way that they work, the projects that they run, the people who are on their team. There's so many reasons why we choose a tool, right? Um, but you have to have something. So, there are tons of tools out there. I'm always a fan of, if you're running projects that have budgets and that they have specific deadlines, to use a project planning tool to
Yeah.
create a project plan, a step-by-step plan that basically shows you how you're going to get from point A to point B, and all of the steps in between. Teams who are working in companies and they're working on multiple projects, it's important for them to pull those plans together for all of their projects so that they can see how available people are, what workloads look like, all of that. So, yeah, I would say project management tools in general are great for teams. Project plans specifically are important uh,
Yeah.
for keeping projects and teams on track. So
I
it's like
love
a
that.
little bit of
Well,
a non-answer, but
no, it does. And that's, I mean, there is so much out there, and and I think that whether it's fancy with a lot of bells and whistles, or if it's just like literally like someone at home with their checklist, a priority list and a
Yeah.
checklist, you got your
Yeah. It
pool of
just
stuff you
depends on
want to
what you're
get done,
doing.
and you're just writing it down, and knocking
It's a
them off.
commitment to being organized, really, more than anything. And that's what I find with a lot of creative folks is, and I say with creative folks, I'm creative too. I'm a writer, basically. And so when people want to organize their work and they don't know where to start, then we start with estimates and plans.
I love
And
that.
that's what gets you organized and really keeps you more accountable to getting the work done. Like your daughter said, hey, I got so much done today. It's because you spent the time to think about what the things were that you needed to do, what order you needed to get them done in, and then you just
Yeah.
got to it. It really
Yep.
can help so much.
I love that. There was a great thing that I love writing as well. And I was doing a master's. I took a hiatus from it because I did a million other things at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But I was working on a master's in screenwriting. And there was a great video I saw of this one writer who talked about how they outline every movie they work on. And they're like, I take a sticky notes, I put sticky note on the board for each scene, and I know what's in each scene. And then one at a time, I just start hammering them out. And this person was like, once they outlined the whole story, they didn't have to write it in a sequential order. Sometimes they'd go over here and write this scene because they felt it, and then sometimes they
Yeah.
go and write it right over here. But they were able to do that because they were organized enough to be able to go, this is my story. I'm going to get from here to here. Let's play with this. Let's paint this part of the picture first.
Yeah.
And we had some beautiful, I remember, the paint by numbers, right? You sit there and you get the paint by numbers and it shows you this whole picture, and you can't see the picture. Sometimes it's hard to see a picture. Think about the Mona Lisa or something. I mean, obviously Da Vinci probably envisioned it, but for everyone else looking at that, it's like, no, I can't see that, But
Mm-hmm.
if you can break things down, certainly it's not the Mona Lisa, but you can get a paint by numbers and at least get the general color tones in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly there's a lot more
Mm-hmm.
skill that comes along, but when you can break things down into steps, again, you can
Oh,
climb
yeah.
mountains.
So I don't know if you know this, but there's a project management tool called a work breakdown structure. And it's something I always recommend people learn about. It's one of the things that I teach about when I'm talking about estimating projects. But it's basically the idea of a work breakdown structure is breaking your work down into steps and then sub steps or tasks and subtasks, right?
I love it.
So the example I often use is if I'm moving, right? I'm going to sell my house. That's a phase.
Yeah.
I can break down all the steps. I'm going to look for a new house. Lots of work there that I need to do. And then I'm going to move. And we know that moving, there's tons of work there. It's funny. I have this example in slides somewhere in a presentation because I did it myself when I moved one house to another, and I got it so wrong, right? Because it was the first time I really did it on that scale. But there was something there at least to guide me. And that's the thing. Like estimating time on anything is really tough. But at least thinking through the steps of what you need to do will help you to get there a little bit faster, I think.
There was one when I was doing business school, there was a great one, and it was really dumbed down. And I kind of love that for this section, but it was like, imagine you're building a house. Okay. Now, can you put the roof up before the foundation is laid? Not really,
Yeah.
You need a foundation and you need walls. Certainly you could, to save time, if it's working that way, prefabricate it over here and then have pieces ready to go. Certainly there are ways to kind of work through it, but you can't put a roof on until you have the other pieces in place, and so there is a flow that you have to look at. And certainly there are cool, creative ways to maximize time, but there literally are steps. If I want to become an ultra marathon runner, I better start off tomorrow by taking a small walk around the block. That is a starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, what you're getting at really kind of gets into just process, right? And how
Yeah.
in my industry, a lot of people trying to make things happen in the same way over and over again. And that's fine if you got an established process that works, but sometimes process needs to be tweaked.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't follow the process by the book, and you have to think
Yeah.
critically about what's going to work best. And I love that example of screenwriting. Like, I mean, that's just like a beautiful mind, right? It's like I've laid everything out, and I'm going to dive in this place, and I'm going to work on it, and then I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to work on it, and then I'm going to come back at the end and make sure that all kind of work hangs together. Like, I think that's so
Right.
cool. I would love to do that someday.
Right. It's one of those, when I heard that method, I was like, ooh, that's beautiful. Like, 'cause
Yeah,
I
it's
get
cool.
it. I've always written very like linear, but like
Hmm.
chronologically, but I was like, that's very memento. I dig it. It's got a cool vibe. Well, let
Hmm.
me ask you this one. Yeah, with teamwork, how do you get people like your family members or coworkers to actually do what they say they do? How do you kind of get people to kind of step up and carry their own weight, pull their own weight?
Yeah, that's a good one. So it's all about expectation setting and, again,
Uh,
communication, right? So you're having a conversation. Let's say it's with a family member who is going to make dinner or prepare for dinner or something like that. It's sitting down and having a conversation and saying, this is what you're going to do, right?
right.
Right? This is what you're going to do, right? And that person acknowledging, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And then it's probably, depending on who that person is, checking in with that person. And this is the most annoying part about being a project manager, is having to be the person who is constantly following up just to make sure the work's happening. It's like
Yeah.
nobody wants to be a babysitter, and certainly no one wants to be babysat, but there are some people who require it. So that's when project managers have to step in and say, hey, just checking in to see how you're doing on your deadline. It's coming up. When are we going to do a review to make sure that the work is on track? That's the other thing, right? Making sure that there are
Yeah.
checkpoints where you can check in and say, hey, how are we doing on this? Do we need some course correction? Do you maybe need some help? Are we on track? So I think it's a lot of that. It's for me as a project manager, more as a junior project manager, it was um, having the courage to not worry about being a pain in the ass.
I like that.
Having the courage to go to people and hold them accountable for the work that they're set out to do. And then also having the courage when people were not holding their end of the deal to have the difficult conversation with them that is, hey, if this doesn't happen, you know, this is the risk, or this is the issue that it's going to cause. And how are you going to help me solve it? Not being the person who absorbs everyone's problem and solves everyone's problems, but
Yeah.
the person who facilitates the problem solving.
And this is something, as a father, as a teacher, I taught for a long time, and I still teach at a university. And one of the things that was interesting is that I was noticing with a lot of my students, there is this like, trying to figure out the nicest way to say this, not getting stuff done. And there's an endless number of excuses to not get something done.
Mm.
And which I love that you say it's okay to kind of not be that. You can be the person who stands and says, you know what? And I remember I pulled a couple of my students aside, and every week there was a new excuse. One of the guys like turned his phone on and was like dribbling the basketball, shooting hoops while he's like, and I was like, are you playing basketball right now? He's like, it's this class is at the same time as as the team practice. So I'm here. I'm like, you were not here. And then he never got any assignments turned in. He was the nicest kid. But finally I pulled him aside and I said, you know what? You can work your way through. You can get caught up in this class. But I just want to tell you, in the workplace, if you do this same thing, you will get fired 100%. And I talked to my daughter about this. And the other day, she sent me a text while I was out with my wife. She was out with her grandma. She suddenly saw my mother-in-law texting me. I was like, "Who is this? What is this all about?" And my daughter was like, "Daddy, I feel like I played too much video games lately. And I was like, okay, well, why do you feel that way? She's like, I just haven't gotten as much done for this. And she's like, I feel like I'm behind on my studies. And I said, I love that you had that realization and I said, so how can we figure out a way forward? But one of the things too is it was up to me. And I had earlier in the day talked to her about accountability and talked to her
Mm,
about, and we had this conversation about her not knowing her times tables. And she then had this realization. So it was like I shined the light and then there was this aha for her. And it was like, I always like, and I am one of those people that is always trying to call people out. It's kind of a problem for me, but I love it. I love it because, I get things done and then we can all
yeah,
look back and have fun looking back at what we accomplished.
right. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I can't force you to get your work done. I can't force you to believe that you need to do this. I can't force you to be good at your job. I can't force anything. I can encourage and I
Yeah.
can try to motivate and I could set the right boundaries to give you a space to be successful. Right.
I love that.
And if you, as a professional, can't follow through on that, then there's not much I can do for you. You
Right.
know, I have coached project managers, creative directors, junior project managers from all walks of life, from all over the place. And everyone has the same issue. I can't force someone to do the job.
Yeah.
You know,
It's true.
as a PM, I can't force a designer to get something done on time and be happy with the quality of it. Like, it's something that they need to do. The best thing that we can do is set up a good culture and environment in a project that
Yeah.
creates the right boundaries where things are written. And we have a dedicated plan and a way for achieving a goal. Uh, without that, without that level of project management, sure, work happens. It's probably not as efficient. Communication might not be as good, depending on the people who are doing the work. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm with you. It's really tough to be in a position where someone just isn't doing what they need to do, and it's so clearly
Right.
spelled out for them that as a professional, you almost get to a point where you want to give up, right?
Yeah.
Because there's only so much that you can do, and you end up feeling like you're wasting your time on someone. So it's tough, and I'll tell you, like, I've seen it happen more recently with junior folks coming straight out of school, not having
Yeah.
a sense of responsibility, not wanting to prove that they can do a good job, just feeling like, well, somebody will just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, when they do tell you what to do and then you don't do it, you got issues. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate to see that happen, but um, I don't see it that often.
Yeah. Well, life is the great educator of us all, so
Right?
I think people will get it eventually. No,
Hmm.
another question. What's the best way to really get everyone on the same page about what's most important? I know communication and setting the culture at the beginning, but are there any other things that can really help people get on the same page?
Well, talking about projects and
Yeah.
teams, goals, everything needs to be led with a goal. What are we
Yeah.
doing and why are we doing it? Right? Because things happen on projects, ideas come up. Uh, there's a revolving door of people coming in and out of projects sometimes. There's like lots
Yeah.
of change on projects. So having a goal to kind of guide every decision, I think is really important. I think in addition to that, to your point about communication, it's very kind of scheduled or regimented communication that's needed. So I always recommend regular stand-up meetings. So quick meetings for us to get together to talk about who's working on what, where does everything stand, so we can have a sense for progress. I also think project managers should write status reports for projects, so weekly or biweekly. What's happened last, what's coming next, What
I
action
love that.
items are there for anyone involved in the project, on the team, the stakeholder team, client team? And then what issues or risks might be kind of when I'm looking at my project plan? What are some things that could go wrong, and what should we discuss to make sure that they don't go wrong? So I
That's,
think that type of communication really helps to keep things on track.
yeah. Well, then that leads to another question. What do you do when things do go wrong? How do you handle that?
Well, it depends on what goes wrong, Sean.
Right.
There's so
Gut
many things
reaction,
that
start
go
throwing
wrong,
things.
right? Yeah, like light everything on fire. No, yeah. I mean, I guess it just depends. I mean, and that's where I'm getting at with the status report is like a good project manager will be assessing things at all times and seeing like what is the potential for catastrophe here, right?
Right?
What are the possible issues? What are the risks? Like continuously looking at the plan, understanding where the team is, where the work is happening, where it's not happening. Having a general sense of where everything stands is so important. So then when things do go wrong, it's like, well, so I noted last week that, we might go off schedule because this thing happened, right? So it's like, I'm a fan of putting those details out there early and often so that everyone becomes a part of solving the problem. So that I don't
Yeah.
have to come to
Oh,
everyone and say, oh, we're way over budget, or oh, we're like a month late on the project when we didn't have time to figure that out
yeah.
beforehand. It's always a conversation. Do you want me to stop?
He's all good now.
Okay. It's always a conversation. It's always a challenging conversation.
Yeah.
I've been on projects with paying clients where things have gone wrong. And let's say my team has proposed something that is way out of scope, something that like we can design, but we can't code because it'll take like 100 hours more than we're scoped for. And
Yeah.
that's always a challenging conversation because it's like, hey, we created these great things for you, and we know you're really excited about where we're going to go with it, but we can't do that within the current scope, right? So when I have to do that, I always come to that conversation with at least 3 options for solutions. And
Love
it's
that.
usually the explosive option that I know they don't want, like, hey, you're just going to have to pay 40 grand more or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, or it's maybe we can partner on this and maybe there's a way that we can accomplish this and split the work up and keep it within scope. Or it's we have an alternative idea. Maybe we need to kind of play this down and save that for another phase of the project or something like that. So always coming to the table to those conversations with a sense for how you can fix things, and smooth things over rather than like, we have a problem. Like nobody wants to hear about problems only,
Yeah.
right? I know I don't.
Definitely. I remember when I was younger, I was working after university. I worked on a couple big films in Hollywood, and it was super fun. And I remember one day we were shooting this movie. It was a Ron Howard movie, and we were shooting down in Hollywood Park, right in Inglewood, near where the flight path to LAX. So they're, doing all these they have all these actors outside, and then plane flies over, and cut, 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 and then go
Ruins
again.
the shot.
It ruins the shot. It's just like was like so crazy loud. And then I was talking to some of the guys on the set, and they were talking about one big director who likes explosive things. And they were like, yeah, that guy working on his movies is always interesting. And they told me this story about this one day that someone who was supposed to back up film backed it up incorrectly. And it was back in the day of film. And it was like a day's worth of shooting lost. And it was like a couple $1,000,000 down the drain in that one day. And so it was like, oof. But
Big mistake.
one of the things like that is like when I think about things and a plan going south, just absolutely going wrong in my own life, yeah, it doesn't have that type of implications. But when you have some of these big projects, you can get the stakes high. And again, it's really interesting to start looking at these solutions and coming up with different things. One of my favorite movies that looks at that and looks at when everything has gone wrong, and teams that just had come in with a mission was the movie Apollo 13. You remember that movie? There's a scene
Vaguely.
where Tom Hanks and them are out in space. No, it was actually Tom Hanks. The astronauts are in space, and a part went out on the ship, and they had one of the astronauts that had gotten sick the day of the launch, and he was down on land, and he had to absolutely MacGyver, before MacGyver even existed, this device into creation to filter the air so these guys didn't suffocate. And they said they came into a room and they're like, these are the things that are on this spaceship. We need to turn this into a working air filter to remove all of the carbon monoxide out of the air. And everyone bought in and they pulled it off. But it was just this beautiful thing where the team came together in such an absolutely like synergistic way that everyone was all in, and it worked out perfectly. But there were a couple times that they had to go back to the drawing board, to re-engage and go at it again.
I love that part about working with a team. I mean, to me, that was always the best thing. I mean, I work with teams now, but not in teams, right? I'm more of a consultant and coach, but to me, I always love working with a team to brainstorm ideas, whether that's brainstorming the risk on a project, like these are all the things that could go wrong, or brainstorming like blue sky ideas. This is what this could be. Or brainstorming solutions. I mean, that's a lot of what I do anyway. It's, what are we going to design to achieve this goal? Or what are we going to create to achieve a specific goal? But the power of bringing different disciplines and mindsets and backgrounds to the table to come up with those ideas, I think is really exciting.
I love that. Well, one last question.
Sure.
I want to ask you this. If you could give your younger self advice about getting things done in your life, what advice would you give your younger self?
Wow, that's a good one. I think if I were to give my younger self advice, it would be to really just stick to it, to create the habits and to know that it's okay. It's a good thing to have those habits. I think I'm a little bit of a naysayer inside. So I see like, well, the best way to do this is this, that, and the other. And I'm like, but that's not for me. But honestly, like, especially based on this conversation, the basic idea of a to-do list, it's so simple. Okay, why didn't I have that when I was in college? Why didn't I do that? Why is nobody teaching us that? That's a big part. That's a big reason why I wrote my book. Honestly, design school is not teaching any designer how to be really great as a designer, but also great as a business person, a person who
100%.
knows how to spend their time and to do things the most efficient way. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand.
You're preaching to the choir. Where can people find your book and find out more information about you?
Yeah. So my business website is sameteampartners.com. I also do personal blogging at brettharned.com. And my book is linked from both of those sites, but my book was published by Rosenfeld Media in 2017. You can also find it on Amazon. And it sounds like I'll be working on a second edition here soon.